governor of the former British colony has spoken out, calling it a betrayal and a, quote, new Chinese dictatorship. The proposed legislation would ban activity Beijing considers subversive. It's been condemned by pro-democracy activists who say China is only interested in imposing its will on the semi-autonomous territory. Activists are calling for demonstrations, but it's not clear how many people will turn out because of social distancing laws. Here's Adrian Brown.
On the day China announced it was bypassing Hong Kong's parliament to push through a new security law, the city's leader was putting on a brave face. Surrounded by her cabinet, Carrie Lam said Hong Kong people and foreign investors had nothing to fear as she offered support for the legislation.
There will be protests of all sorts in Hong Kong, as we have seen. But the important thing is for the people of Hong Kong to realize that without protection of national security, many of the things that we enjoy, many of the things that we treasure will be lost.
When China regained sovereignty over Hong Kong from Britain in 1997, it promised the city a high degree of autonomy for 50 years. But China's leadership now says those freedoms are being undermined by violent protests, subversion, calls for independence and foreign interference. And under the basic law, Hong Kong's mini-constitution, they say they have the right to impose security legislation. On Friday, the vice chairman of China's National People's Congress, Wang Sheng, confirmed that China's security agents will operate in Hong Kong when needed, words that have unsettled many people here.
They all feel that the one country, two systems is dead. And now the reaction is general panic. People would like to emigrate and making preparations to leave Hong Kong.
Some people we spoke to said the law was long overdue. Others resigned to it.
I think it would have happened anyway. Like, if it's a fear, I think I've gotten past this stage without being afraid.
It all makes sense. A country needs laws to protect itself. People only abuse freedom if there is too much.
Business groups here fear the proposed law will threaten Hong Kong's status as Asia's leading financial centre and put further pressure on its independent judicial system. It is almost a year since protests began over another proposed law that would have allowed wanted people to be sent to the mainland. That bill was eventually dropped. But the prospect of more unrest this time is unlikely to deter China's government from pressing ahead with this security law. Adrian Brown, Al Jazeera, Hong Kong.
China's released its budget for next year, including a 6.6% increase on defense spending. That's the lowest annual increase in nearly 30 years. Only the US spends more than the $180 billion Chinese budget. With the world's largest army, a growing navy and missile technology, China's military aims are being questioned. Japan is urging China to explain what new weaponry will be used for. Let's bring in James CHAR out of Singapore. He's an associate fellow at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. James CHAR, welcome to the NewsHour. The Chinese military undoubtedly getting better at certain things, but how does it compare to other armed forces around the region and around the world?
Well, Peter, basically the PL is still in a developing phase, and most estimates actually suggest that they are probably 20 to 30 years behind the US military. So with the reduction in the growth of the PLA budget, I do not see any huge impact on its development because if you look at the announcement of the reforms by Xi Jinping himself in 2015, we have come to the end of the third phase, which is to reform the policies of PLA personnel. So there may be some small tweaks to how the PLA will go from here, but I do not see any huge disruptions to its drive for modernization.
OK, correct me if I've got the stats on this right, but this is, in effect, the lowest rate of increased spending that we've seen for 30...
Absolutely, Peter. It is actually the lowest in 32 years, in fact, since reform and opening up.
Despite the low level of spending in relation to the budget, will this keep the military insulated from the effects of coronavirus?
Well, if you look at a report that was announced in the the MPC yesterday, it is made very clear that the personnel who are still in the PLA will be well taken care of, and those who have been demobilized will likewise receive the retirement benefits that have been promised to them. And what we can infer from the large cut in troop numbers in 2015 of a reduction of 300,000 personnel. So the higher salaries and the improved benefits which come under this latest phase, the third phase rather, of the PLA reforms should not actually burden the reduction in the growth of the PLA budget too much.
Okay. When Mr. Lee talks about, and I quote, innovative development of defence-related science, is that alternatively known as cyber attacks on other countries?
Well, Peter, you may factor that in, but I think he's referring more broadly to what China has referred to as civil-military fusion, which is how the civilian sector and the military sector can work hand in hand in terms of pushing forward the reforms of the defense sector within the country itself. And as you can see from reports in the past few years, yes, it is quite clear that the cyber attacks probably originating with the PLA, but has been reported as being conducted by civilians. So that's one way to look at what you have just said, Peter. Okay, and would it be fair to say that Beijing is not taking its eyes off the ideological balls here? I mean, the manoeuvres around Taiwan have been going on. They're still ongoing, despite COVID-19. Absolutely. Well, the military harassment of Taiwan, it's something that is absolutely necessary under the perspectives of the Communist Party, because it's one way for them to show that they have not given up on the unifying the country, and it's also useful in terms of Xi Jinping, especially in his current situation. He has lost, or rather, he's still in a very dominant position, although he's been weakened somewhat. So by focusing on military operations or exercises around Taiwan and increasing the frequency is one way for him to prove and demonstrate to his armed servants that he is committed to national unity and, of course, the continued improvement of PLA capabilities.
James CHAR, there in Singapore. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you, James.
My pleasure, Peter.